спокойно спи.
It was a really long time since we've got a good Russian game. A game we could be proud it was made by our fellow countrymen. And when Atomic Heart was announced, all the Russian gamers thought of only one thing. Will it really be a decent game or just another ladder racing club? Expectations from the game are really high, and it couldn't be different. Did you see those trailers? And for us, the trailers were even more fascinating because of the music used there. We never saw any game with the 80s and 90s Russian pop hits. And usually, high expectations don't lead to anything good. Usually, high expectations only spoil the final impressions, even from a really decent game. Remember Cyberpunk 2077? Everyone expected too much from it, and more than a good game was doused with buckets of shit on the release just because it turned out not to be as brilliant and fantastic as the players imagined. And yes, the compatibility issues on the original PS4 and Xbox One consoles. So everyone who waited for the release are wondering now, will Atomic Heart meet expectations or will it be another failure with enormous budget? Hello YouTube, my name is Victor and you're watching the Russian Video Game Comrade Show. I've already finished Atomic Heart and today we're gonna try to understand if it's worth playing it. If you have been following the trailers and gameplay videos shared by the developers over the past 5 years, you probably imagined that an alternative Soviet Bioshock would be, pardon the tautology, something in between Bioshock and modern Fallout games. And you were absolutely right on that. Atomic Heart is really a post-Soviet Bioshock with turbocharged house on chicken legs, Soviet propaganda posters and huge statues of workers and collective farmers built by Soviet neural networks. All this looks like a real embodiment of the books of Soviet science fiction writers a lot of Russian children read growing up, including me of course. And at the first glance, a real astonishing one. When the game started, I really couldn't believe I'm playing a Russian game. Yes, over time, when you look closely at the details, you notice that everything here is not as drop-dead next-gen polished as it seems at first. And sometimes the graphics even look mediocre. But the overall impression of the visual component of the game is shut up! Are you serious? This time has finally come? This is a real AAA Russian game? I can't believe my eyes. I was also very pleased that the developers are not at all embarrassed with the Bioshock similarity. They even ironically tease themselves.
I believe that the unscheduled acceleration was caused by the elevator access system being hacked. Otherwise, Dr. Filatova would not have been able to initiate it.
So she hacked the system. Kinda like how all these poor bastards got hacked to bits. So that's Neptune, huh? Looks nice. Actually, it looks amazing. A rapture.
I'm not really sure if it was a smart move to prevent people poking the developers, or the guys from Montfish are really self-ironic. But one thing I know for sure. Self-arrogant snobs would definitely say their game don't look like anything, and won't add such jokes in their game. So I think that the guys with Montfish more likely are self-ironic. And that's a thumbs up for developers from me. And the Fallout games series, the only thing that reminds the players of it in Atomic Heart is a Soviet animated wild boy-like character. But you don't see him often. He is found in the difficulty level select screen, the upgrade menu and the final credits. I think that's it. It's probably the right decision though. Personally, I really like Easter eggs in any game. And there is a huge difference between referring to something and blind copying of someone's content. And in my opinion, being similar to Bioshock isn't something new. There are a lot of games with a sense of Bioshock in them. Basically, any retro-futuristic first-person action-adventure can be one. And no one accusing them of being Bioshock's ripoffs. And I also think that Atomic Heart can't be accused of stealing either. References, yes. Mindless copying, no. On the gameplay side, Atomic Heart is really Bioshock. And this time, unfortunately, it isn't a compliment. Let me explain. Bioshock Infinite was released almost 10 years ago in 2013. And since then, the games have already stepped forward quite a lot in terms of both plot and gameplay mechanics. And it sometimes seems that Atomic Heart is still somewhere a little behind modern realities, so to like it, you'll have to get used to it. The most difficult thing is the character control and combat. I don't know how it will feel on PC, I played the game on a PlayStation 5. But with the default control settings, the game feels a little outdated for 2023. This is not that critical, but you can feel it from the very first moments of the gameplay. Lowering the sensitivity of the controller and the options solve this problem slightly, but be prepared for the fact that you'll need some time getting used to the game's controls. Also, this adds a certain amount of problems to the combat scenes, and sometimes the combat sequences in the game really pissed me off. The character doesn't always quickly respond to controls, having a delay changing weapons, and doesn't always instantly obey when you're trying to issue a series of actions. For example, if you want to quickly freeze your opponent with a glove and then hit him with an axe, keep in mind that you can sometimes fail, and sometimes it can lead you to almost instant death. You press the glove ability button, it seems that the hand is raised, but a moment later your action is cancelled as you stopped pressing the action button. And you didn't. You try to release the button and then press it again. But the animation has already started, and it takes some time till your character will make another attempt. And when he does, you already find yourself cornered surrounded with a pack of enemies, and it's already impossible to get out. And this could even not be worth a mention if it didn't lead to the cornering thing. This is really a problem. At some point, with a lot of enemies on the screen, you start to get into situations when it's physically impossible to get out. Even a tiny robot can't be bypassed if it's standing in your way. The game considers them a full-fledged obstacle and doesn't allow you to jump over them, dodge or leave the battle if there is not enough free space nearby, and very often, while you are trying to get out of this situation, 5 more enemies come and you instantly find yourself pressed into the wall and helpless. You're trying to swing your axe, but the enemies are spamming you with attacks and it's impossible to do anything. And the only outcome here is an instant death and starting over. At some point, this started to piss me off. Once, trying to avoid such a situation, I was stupidly squeezed into a save room, and the enemies continued to attack me through the walls even there. The only way to solve this was to load a previous saved game. And that was not cool at all. You have to either somehow manage to kill everyone, or you have to start over. And there are practically no aftersaves here. You have to save the old-fashioned way, in the save rooms. By the way, I take the save rooms themselves rather as an advantage, and it's a good, honest challenge to the game. But not the cornering thing. But the most annoying thing for me here are constantly spawning repair robots. The person who came up with this. If you're watching this now, I really want you to know that I hate you. Among all the other things, the developers decided to add some stealth to the game. I personally hate stealth games, but this is my personal problem and I don't complain about this decision. Especially since, except for just a few scenes, there is no need to play Atomic Heart through stealth. Moreover, catching humanoid robots and approaching them from behind is not an easy task, and in 99% of cases, spending time and nerves on this is simply not worth it. Perhaps the situation is different at the hard difficulty level. I played on normal. And I wouldn't even complain about the strange decision with cameras that, hit by an electric shock discharge or even a shot, turn off literally for a minute and then turn back on. But these dispensers of flying repair scum on the walls are just beyond good and evil. Especially in a location where you need to kill all the robots that get in your way and then play the classic snake game to move on. And yes, of course, this attack is stopping you from playing. Just imagine this. You finish a bunch of enemies and run to play a snake game. Meanwhile, repair robots constantly fly out of these fucking dispensers and revive the assholes you just killed. And of course they instantly rush to knock down your game of Snake again. Yep, these robot dispensers can be cut down with an electric shock, but just like the camera, literally for a minute, and after that it starts working again. I really wonder if the person who made this is also a fan of the bats in the 8-bit Castlevania games. Since I mentioned the Snake Room, I also have to mention that it's not a good idea to change the gameplay in the middle of the game. Well, it's just my opinion, someone can really like the fact that in 10 hours of gameplay approx, the scheme explore the surroundings, solve a couple of riddles, beating some enemies in the way, instantly changed to "We liked Doom 2016 a lot, so now Atomic Heart is an arena-based Doom 2016-like game too." And it could be even fine for me if such arenas were simply thrown several times during the game for a change. I started this video with a fighting scene for a reason. Sometimes in the first part of the game there are arenas too, but they are rare, and every one of them is packed with a heavy metal cover of some Soviet well-known in Russia pop track, and it's really amazing. Won't you like a zombie fighting sequence accompanied with a black metal version of Madonna or, for example, drum and bass version of Sinatra? That is really cool and atmospheric. Or the Hedgehog boss fight the developers have already shown before the game release. This is just an awesome boss fight. I was really amazed how dynamic and cool this fight was. Fantastic, just fantastic. But not changing all the game to mindless fighting scenes in the middle of it. And I have to tell you, I really hate the approach to make you play the game longer by stretching the gameplay with unnecessary ultra-hard fights every other minute. Seriously guys, your game is already long enough. I didn't even explore the side locations to collect additional weapon upgrades, as I had limited time to get through the game before the release and make a review. And still I spent a good 20-25 hours on Atomic Heart. And the scene when, in the good traditions of Bioshock, there are 2 of them, you first need to find 4 flasks in 4 different interesting locations in order to open the door, and then almost the same, only 4 flasks are changed into 4 parts of the robot's body, absolutely aren't needed to be diluted with an idea, you know, he finds everything real quickly, so let's respawn a dozen anthropomorphic robots in the hub he has to return every time, and maybe even 5 more annoying flying shooters, so he won't be bored there. When this happened the 3rd time, I said fuck it. I'm done wasting my time on this and switching to the easy difficulty. Moreover, when you're searching the spare parts, you are already thrown in the same kill-em-all arenas, and adding even more such arenas is just an overkill. I've already told you about the awesome Hedgehog boss, and I have to add that almost all the other bosses in the game are also okay. All except the stupid Carnage-like Ivy thing. I really have to say that I haven't seen a more boring boss fight in a long time. And I wouldn't even begin to say anything about him if, in the manner of stretching the hordes of enemies above, the developers wouldn't have decided that it would be a good idea to make the players beat their most shitty boss several times. And when I'm saying several times, I mean at least 4. The same dull boss. 4 times. I managed to skip one of the upcoming fights, but it was extremely difficult. The enemies in the game are very annoying, and you can't even drive away from these shit-eaters by a car. I was just lucky that according to the plot, it was necessary to go down to the next underground location, and this scum couldn't get into the elevator with me. And after saving and loading in a new location, his life bar on the screen finally disappeared. Remove all these dumb unnecessary things and I'll tell you that Atomic Heart is awesome, regardless it's a little outdated. After all, here you have an awesome setting, which we have never seen in the video games made in such quality. A soundtrack that's completely unusual for such games. I understand that you guys are not familiar with Russian pop music, and you won't be amazed as any Russian guy who plays the game. You have to just believe me here. The Just You Wait cartoons on the TV screens of the save rooms, smart and funny audio diaries, sort of like standard but kind of non-trivial logical puzzles with locks, simple spatial puzzles, and crazy Max Payne-like dreams. For all this, even despite the above flaws, you can really fall in love in Atomic Heart. I really wish they'd also added some horror-style elements, as in one scene you really wait for it to come, but then nothing happens. But I understand that it's simply impossible to cover all the areas of the entertainment in a single game. And well, to be honest, I would like that in the open world there was at least some opportunity to explore all the beauty drawn by the designers, and not just stupidly rush to the marker on assignment. In the open world, there are such a lot of enemies and cameras, and if you hesitate a little, a swarm of enemies will appear around you and will instantly trample you into the ground. Therefore, at some point, I simply gave up on research and began to run locations along the edge towards the task marker, periodically stopping in a narrow place where they couldn't bypass me and pitch me in the corner in order to shoot the pursuers and then continue moving on. But in those places where they gave me an opportunity to look around without constantly oncoming enemies, for example at the train station before entering the train, I did it with a great pleasure. Damn, seriously, it's such a huge job to invent all this, draw it, and put it all together to make it look that good. I'm really fond of the game for all these things. I won't say much about the plot. There is one, it's not bad, although rather banal, but it doesn't slip into a cliché, and in some parts it even can surprise you. For example, being sure of the correctness of my choices, I couldn't guess I'm gonna get the bad ending. And in my opinion, it's really good when you can't predict the outcome, especially when you think you totally can. Banal things about the fact that weapons can be crafted, upgraded, that you have a talking glove, a close analog of plasmids from Bioshock, and that it can also be upgraded, will be also left in this review aside. You've seen it all in the trailers, and the things are exactly as you thought they would be. The only thing I will note here, unlike Bioshock, where you really need some plasmids to advance in the game, in Atomic Heart plasmids are only your side weapon, and you can easily finish the game without upgrading any of them. On the technical side, the game is also good, at least if you're playing on a PS5. I practically didn't notice any terminal bugs, even in the pre-release version. And this, in my opinion, is a fairly serious indicator of quality. In over 20 hours of playing, the scripts malfunctioned a few times, not opening the doors that were supposed to be opened after defeating all the enemies in the area, and sometimes the sound glitched overplaying one dialogue over another. But I'm sure even this will be fixed fast. And believe me, I have seen so many bugged versions from eminent studios. For example, I still can't believe how bad PlayStation's Days Gone was at its release. I know what I'm talking about. So the fate of the cyberpunk Atomic Heart shouldn't befall. And this is another huge thumbs ups for the guys from Monfish. And I want to remind you that this is the first game by Monfish. Considering all the things said above, I'd say that by the standards of 2023, Atomic Heart deserves a solid 7 out of 10. But for the atmosphere, the setting, the soundtrack, and for the fact that this is the first really AAA game from a Russian studio for a long time, for the fact that this is not another ladder racing club, as it always happens with all the going to be the greatest game Russian games, I'd say Atomic Heart is a 9 of 10, and I really think that it's really worth a playthrough. You can buy it on any console and PC starting tomorrow, and it will also be included in the Xbox Game Pass on day 1. So if you have an Xbox and a Game Pass, you just have to at least try to play it. And I really think you won't be disappointed with the decision to do it. Thank you for watching today's episode. I really hope you liked it. Please press thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Have a nice day, good luck!